Good evening, everybody. Evening in our world.
Howdy, howdy.
Timothy and I at the helm tonight. Our faithful compatriot Jim Case is, what he's doing would be too much information to share. Jim is not with us this evening, but we wish him a speedy recovery and hope to have him back in front of the mic next week as we try to do this each week.
Manuel, Jimbo.
Yeah. Our attempt to do this 2 weeks ago didn't go so well. It was really interesting. Sometimes I step back and say, well, what was that all about? Mm-hmm. But that, for those wondering, was we finished getting through a hour and a half, almost 2 hour podcast, and go to hit the stop button to end the recording, and look down at the iPad, and it's doing an update, and it dumped the 2 hours that we had just worked on doing the iPad. So apparently what we were talking about that night wasn't supposed to get recorded. I could look at it that way. For whatever reason, it didn't happen, but sometimes I can walk away from experiences like that really trying to have the higher road mentality of just going with the flow and not being tripped out about it. And then, there's the other side of the monkey brain that says, wow, that was a complete waste of time and it wasn't productive and you didn't get anything done. And I'm like, where's that coming from?
Right, exactly.
But nevertheless, we're back at it tonight and hope to just dive in where we left off and have some fun stabbing at this thing that we call truth and trying to untwist it. An update for me in just sharing with our audience and with Timothy is getting all this stuff out again and looking at it 8 years after I originally wrote it has been a fun little journey. That some of this stuff I didn't think I really at the time I wrote it thought that I had it all nailed down and everything, and it's just been interesting over the last 8 years how it's expanded a bit, and there's been some fun little challenges that Timothy and Jim have pointed out that have gotten into some pretty great discussion, and this is a tool that I continue to use almost on a daily basis, if not sometimes even multiple times a day. But it's been fun, and it's fascinating when you take a notion at just trying to understand what is truth. And I know that we've taken an attempt to define that toward the beginning of each of our podcasts, and it would be interesting to go back and listen to all of them and see what continuity there is between our attempts of defining what truth is, and whether there is a continuity there or whether we're all over the map. It would be interesting to kind of go back and take a look or listen to that. But what I've noticed is in the last couple of weeks for me, in my personal reading and just trying to be awake and pay attention to what's showing up in the universe for me, that I'm back at this place where I'm really questioning, why are we here? What is the purpose of this journey that we're having on the planet regarding truth? And just because there's so many different directions you can look in that will tell you what the truth is, and then we're left to question, well, really? Is it? And then you really dive into it and study it for a decade, and then you're like, wow, this was all smoke and mirrors. There's no more truth in that than there was in leprechauns and four-leaf clovers and that sort of thing. And maybe there was a time in human history that that made sense, but it doesn't make sense to most of us these days, other than maybe St. Paddy's Day after a few green beers. Maybe it makes sense. I don't know. But there's a lot of things like that we've given our attention to. There's annual festivals that people go all out to do elaborate costumes, and really the pageantry and the time and expense spent on these celebrations of things that were built on truth that are really just stories. and nothing to it at all. But my gosh, they seem to be so important. And whole economies are based on it. Like our silly little thing of Christmas time, of Saint Nicholas and the Yuletide log, and just the evergreen tree, and all these things that come together. But it's like, what in the world is that really all about? But yet we still do it. Everybody listening to this podcast will be affected by Christmas next December 25th. I guarantee it. Whether you're all into it or you're trying to avoid it, you will be affected by it one way or another. Oh yeah, I left out the part about that had something to do with little baby Jesus, but being birthed in the wintertime, while the flocks were out in the pastures eating the dirt, I guess, because there are no green grasses to eat in the wintertime. But anyway, neither here nor there. So regarding, do you want to comment on that, Timothy?
No,
Get you started?
it'd be fun to get into that, dedicate an episode.
Well, maybe around Christmas time we
there
can
we
do
go.
that.
Yeah,
we'll do it seasonally.
Yeah.
Right? So, driving home the last couple of podcasts, I've noticed myself really being ticked off at how much I bought into and was a part of biblical studies. And please don't be offended by what I'm about to say or get ahead of me. And I was just thinking about, there was a time in my life where it seemed like it was the right thing to do to just buy it hook, line, and sinker, and be the wiggly fish on the end of the line that, I don't know, was being reeled in for the butcher shop or wherever that was going. But just this idea that if a sentient being dictated to a man to write this book, or 100 men, or in the version we read today, 66 books being written by 43 different authors, or whatever the number is, the people back then had to absolutely be idiots. And it was like, have we evolved that much, or were they that stupid to have to be told, in the beginning was God, and God divided the day into night, and there was light and there was darkness, and just the step-by-step process, instead of saying, you know what, there's this big ball of gas out there, it's called a frickin' sun, and it's hydrogen, and it's made up of this, and we're 93,000 miles, I mean, all that information was known. It's not like we discovered the information, but why couldn't that book have been written then with the science and the data that we know now?
Absolutely.
Why did it have to be so written like to kindergartners or even preschoolers? Because that's kind of what it feels like to me on the receiving end of this, even today. It's at such a basic, nonsensical
it doesn't require any critical thinking.
So I'm still, again, please, if you're of that ilk, don't be offended by what I'm saying. I'm trying to have some intelligent discussion. There is a little bit of emotion involved with it. I'm not anti-Christian by any means. Only that I don't understand why it had to be written the way that it was. Again, I don't see how in 5,000 years we've evolved that much that people couldn't understand the words that we would use today back then to describe the creation, if that's in fact how it all went down. And so it seems just this giant disservice, because so much of all of these questions that we've been going over really come from religion and really come from what at the time was believed to be the word, the truth. I mean, there's a biblical phrase in the very beginning of Genesis that I am the way, the truth, and the light. Right? And it's like, but it doesn't make any sense. And it's written so poorly, and it could have been done so much better. Where was I when they were writing that down?
All right.
Anyway.
And what's cool is when I met Jeff many, many years ago, I was seeing him professionally. I don't know, it's probably been 12, 13 years. And he and I were both very deeply immersed in our indoctrination, and we were borrowing from that, and we were, looking at it as a healing guide, and didn't talk for a few years. And he and I, in our quest for truth, ended up sort of uncoupling that relationship, and not setting out to do that, not setting out to say, this doesn't feel right, I'm going to prove it wrong. It's, how do I make a better argument for the people that I am having conversations with? That's, at least I'll speak for me. I wanted to be equipped to have intelligent conversations when there were people refuting the actuality, the inerrancy of the Bible. And the more I armed myself with how to come back at people, the more my little dial kept clicking toward what I understood all along, that it was something that was made for a very sophomoric audience, and not a lot of critical thinking skills required, and a suspension of belief. And if you don't understand something, just say God did it. And that wasn't really satisfactory for me, and doesn't seem like it was satisfactory for you either. And I thought it was really interesting to come back into your world after so many years, and you and I were almost exactly on the same page, and it sort of deconverted around the same time for similar reasons. So, and it sure is interesting going home to Texas, where this is just hook, line, and sinker still exists. I have family members that believe in evolution, but they want to just squint at just enough of a distance to see that evolution absolutely is how we all got here, but they don't want to see how that takes away from the biblical account of how things went. And if it's the inerrant word, then anyway, it's a funny thing, and it's just a piece of the sweater, a little snag that someone went in and started pulling slowly, and before you know it, the whole sweater's gone. So yeah, it's a little frustrating for me too, and I think about all that time and all that energy learning these stories, and there's some good stuff in there, and there's some. I'm really happy that I came from that community. I miss that community sometimes, and not necessarily what we were doing, but just the how many people had our backs when we're in that world. But it just felt like I was starving, and all that they could bring me was popcorn. I just felt like I was trying to get full and satiated on popcorn, and I just didn't feel like it was really getting into my truth. And so anyway, but yeah, it'd be fun around Christmas time to take a look at how this all came to play. So
I'm driving home the last couple of times, and I'm having this dialogue with myself of, what would it be like to rewrite it? What would it sound like to be written in a way that would make sense and people could get it, and it wouldn't be based on hocus pocus and fairy tales and disappearing gardens and all this other kind of trees that don't exist anymore. And just... And I'm really not saying all that hasn't happened and didn't happen. I'm just saying I haven't had an experience like that. So it's really kind of hard to relate to something that I haven't had that experience. And if hardly nobody else has had that experience either, then how can we relate to it? So it's like, what is all that anyway? Yeah.
And why would a loving father put his brand new infant children, because they were adults apparently, but they were infantile in their experience, why would he put them in one of the most complex moral and ethical scenarios, the black belt situation? Why would he, out of the whole circumference of the earth, put them right next to the only thing that could destroy them and destroy the future of mankind? Omniscient and omnipotent, but you make this one mistake, and all these consequences are going to come, and you have no experience to know why on earth would you build a hell for your child for being curious?
Sure.
The tree of knowledge. Why? I mean, you created us to be curious. So
take it a step further, and omniscient, all-knowing God, knowing that that's how it was going to go down, have it go down that way, and then say, "Oh, wait a minute, I gave you free will, even though I knew you were going to do that." And like, what?
Yeah.
So you kind of knew that this whole thing was going to go down this way.
Why not just forgive us? Why sacrifice yourself? It's a bizarre story. If you really get away from it and take a look at it with fresh eyes, it's as strange as any of the other religions that are out there, in my estimation.
So it's about a 20-minute drive home, and so I was just thinking, well, what would make more sense to me if it could have been written such as, "Hey guys, it's me, God. I'm neither male nor female." So wrap your head around that one for a minute. But I got a little bored one day, so I started creating the rest of the universe out of nothing. Put your head around that too. So we'll reach back to the possibility of, could something be created from nothing? And let's call that the zero-sum total theory of the universe. Add up all the positive matter, all the negative matter, dark energy, all that sort of thing, it equals zero. But if you really could divide it all, you could have matter and you could have antimatter. And that's about as much as I'm going to share with you right now. But let's just say that it really is possible to create something out of nothing. And then, I compressed it all, and there was this big bang thing, and everything went flying apart, and it was really quite a 4th of July celebration. You really should have been there to see it, and I'll show you the video one day. So how am I doing so far? Would you be listening to that story if somebody was really, and it was all true and real?
Oh, yeah.
So we keep going with the thing. A few billion years goes by, and I've got this universe here, and this universe fits inside of that one, and it's really kind of like the Horton Hears a Who thing, and you really, you can go macro or micro, you can go any direction you want with this, and you're going to find life all over the place. Some of it was bacterial, some of it was intelligent design, because, why be tied down to one thing? Because then you just create a religion around it. So multiple options, multiple scenarios going on. I'm kind of a scientist by nature, so I kind of did a lot of experiments. You're one of my experiments. You guys started, at this time, and there's all these other things going on over here, but you're actually part of this big, huge, beautiful galaxy. And inside of that galaxy, there's all these other moving parts and pieces, and there's this thing called gravity, and I haven't really told you yet, but it's really more electrical than it is based on mass, but you guys will figure that out down the road. Because you're like me, you're scientists too. Got to give you something to work on. So, are we doing okay so far?
I dig it.
But you get little clues along the way. There's words like universe and galaxy, or whatever the words would have been to describe, the different ways that things work and they operate and they interact. And oh, by the way, gang, I created a really violent planet. There's these things called volcanoes and earthquakes and tsunamis and hurricanes, and certain times of the year, little baby zebras swim across rivers in Africa, and there's these big alligators that can't wait to eat them. And I get off on that stuff. So I kind of created the earth that way. Yeah, it's like there's blood. There's meat eaters. You guys are part of a system where life exists because other animals eat other animals. How you like that? And we're like, no, I don't want to live on that planet. It's scary here. It is scary. Have you ever thought about that? That, we're a protein consuming system.
Oh, yeah.
And something has to die in order for something else to continue on.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be a little clue as to how religion got started anyway, with sacrifices and all that other sort of fun stuff. But anyway, it would have been nice to lay it out to where day divided by night is just like, hey, there's this thing called the sun, and the earth rotates, and when you think the sun comes up, it really doesn't. It's just your earth rotating around it. I mean, why not explain it all?
I know.
Why not? Just toss it out there.
Because they were Iron Age sheep herders who didn't have an understanding. And
Are they really that dumb? I mean, seriously?
Yes, they were. Yeah. And they weren't open to other cultures because the Egyptians had the bead on a lot of what was happening in the natural universe. And so did eventually the Maya. Anyway, they did not understand, and the speak in the Bible about things like stars falling into the ocean, and they just really didn't know what the hell they were talking about. It was not a divinely, may have been divinely inspired, but it wasn't. Wasn't written by God. And I was curious to get some clarity. You said intelligent design. Could you help me understand?
I don't know. That word gets tossed around a lot. That's, to me, it would be like the experiment, and there's some thought behind it, and you have an intention, and it's a hypothesis, and let's see how this works, and the end result is going to be this, and it happens. That's really all intelligent design would be to me, as far as having an intention of something to go a certain way or be a certain way.
Can you think of an example of intelligent design?
Well, it's even anything that man has built. My aquaponics system, I think, is an intelligent design.
Okay.
On a more macro level, if I were to try to put consciousness into my fish, that would be interesting. And teach the parents not to eat their children. That's kind of a scary environment to grow up in.
Wow.
And to teach them, well, it's okay because you're going to be back, and it's just your turn to be part of the food supply. The whole reincarnation thing. That to me would be a intelligent design.
But was there a supernatural agency in the intelligent design?
No.
Okay. All
No
right.
clue.
All right. I couldn't tell if you were just sort of goofing and postulating, or if you actually thought that there was, because I'd be curious to know your thoughts on it.
There's certainly a lot of people who think that that's how it is. Again, God got bored. Need to make some friends. So he created parts and subparts, and maybe put a little bit of him or herself in all of these subparts, and there's some people further along in the journey. And
so in that primordial ooze, with the amino acids and the electrical charge and however things got kickstarted, in your mind, you feel like that is a result of like something divine, something supernatural starting it all, kind of kickstarting the whole thing.
I could go with that,
okay,
as well as that was part of it, and then there was also people just dropped off of big ships here, or chicken or egg. I don't know. It's hard to say how that all went down. But to me, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change anything. Nothing change. If you switch all this out and change it up, in the end, we're still trying to figure out how to love each other and get along. And we don't know how to do that.
Right.
And that's the end result behind it. We don't love ourselves. We're at war with ourselves. And we just take that out
Broadcast
in
that
every
outward.
other direction. Right? So we got to figure that out somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And all this other stuff is just interesting. It's just interesting.
Yeah,
that's all.
it is.
Even if we solved it and we knew, how would it change you waking up tomorrow? You'd still have to get up and work and eat and be and live your life. And I don't know that it would really change that much if we knew how it all happened. Or even if we just realized there is no God and there's one ride here. I don't know that would change a lot either. It might for some people.
It did for me. Kind of made this idea of this life being a really important. This isn't a dress rehearsal. This is the only thing that we have evidence for, essentially, and make the most of it. Make the most of every single chance that you have to love somebody, to be close to somebody, to be vulnerable and inspire and compassionate and on and on. I think it's brought out the better angels of my nature to think of it as being fleeting, and it's not all just suffering and crappy here so we one day get up to the pearly gates and streets of gold and praising his name for eternity. God, sounds awful. It really does.
Yeah.
And I had a question for you. So, thinking about this just for a moment, but in the concept of heaven, when you were into that, I don't know if you still are. Are you still Do you still kind of get a sense that there might be some?
I refer to it as the life between lives, or the afterlife.
Okay. Do you think that there's a chance that we'll recognize people that have passed?
Mm-hmm.
So let's just use the example of Granny.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be the Granny in her optimums? Like maybe she thought of herself at the optimum state at 30, and you never knew her at 30. So wouldn't necessarily? How would that work? How would what age would we be, and would there be a physical presence to what we are? Would it just be souls recognizing souls? And you got to put some thought into that.
Yeah.
And I was interested. I was talking to my folks about this last weekend, about the different approaches that people have to the ideas of heaven. And I think most funerals you go to, a Christian-oriented ceremony, are set up with this idea that now this person isn't suffering anymore and they're with Jesus and they're in heaven, right? But from what I understand, the biblical account is that it's a paradise on earth, that it's going to be a return to a paradise on earth. And
which can't happen.
Right.
Because there's those volcano things I was talking about.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be returned to the way the earth was before Adam and Eve screwed up those little kids in the garden with that cool snake and wanted, that cool video game, trying to figure that thing out. But it's supposed to return to that. And anyway, it's an interesting one. What is the paradise? But anyway.
Yeah. So if you want to push on that a little bit more, in the time of the new heaven and the new earth, and where the lamb will lay down with the lion is a reference. So there would be something metaphysically that would change the DNA in the lion to no longer look at the lamb as a yummy dessert, right? And the teeth designed for the lion to rip meat apart apparently would all of a sudden have to become flat in order for it to eat grass, right? Or just we don't need to eat anymore. But you're talking about some fundamental changes that would need to occur.
Sure.
Just from a lightning flash or an EMP pulse, or somehow everything gets uploaded instantaneously. I don't know how that would happen. The shape of teeth changing.
Excuse me.
Lions would get kind of skinny if they had to eat grass with their sharp teeth. Right? The sheep would be fine.
Yeah.
So those are kind of some interesting things to think about.
But I noticed that when you imagine that whole world, it's still kind of loosely constructed around some of the biblical teachings it's like a Course in Miracles. It's like a user-friendly version of the biblical record, and kind of borrowing from that. Does it resonate with you?
Not so much, not really so much at all, because the biblical view, it's all about casting your crowns before Jesus, and that whole just endless spiritual orgy, if you will, of that experience, and it's a one and done. So for me, that makes absolutely no sense. Only because being born in Tijuana or being born in San Diego, you're going to have such completely different experiences, and for your whole eternal state to be based on one ride of which you had no control over, because the Bible doesn't give any account of, you get to choose your parents, you get to choose where you go, you get to choose the different experiences that you have here. That just can't, there's no justice, there's no fairness, there's no nothing, that's just a big huge giant crapshoot.
Right.
So for me, the life between life, or heaven or nirvana or whatever you want to call it, is more of a planning phase of, this is what I learned from my last ride. I did this really well. I still have to work on this. I want to go back and have this experience. And I need to wait 25 years for enough of my soul group to get here and make all the agreements to play the different roles and choose the different strategies that are going to happen, and all of the coincidences that need to occur, and the arrangements and agreements between angels, spirit guides, and all the other helpers or forces or whatever you want to call it. That there's a lot involved with setting it all up, as well as getting re-energized and celebrating what you got accomplished here. This is, for me, like one big lifelong university of learning how to love. Let's love you.
Yeah.
Do you like that? That's a
Yeah.
bitchin' name that just kind of came out right now. I can see the T-shirt. And again, we kind of referenced it 30 minutes ago or so. We don't know how to do that very well. And if there isn't a need to eat in the life between life, because we're able to absorb light or somehow metaphysically exist, where plants don't have to die, animals don't die, there's no death that's occurring, there could be a lot of joy in an environment like that. Even though most people don't have any connection to the death that occurs from the food they're eating, at a subconscious or even an unconscious level, it's there.
Yeah.
And it's disturbing. And if you've ever been in a slaughterhouse or you've been around it, it's gruesome.
It's awful.
And it's like, you go to bed at night, and what does your mind do with that? How could it not think, I could be, the roles could be reversed pretty easily here, Put me out in the woods with a wolf pack or up in Kodiak, Alaska. Those bears could rip me apart just like I watched the chicken get ripped. Or like I ripped the chicken apart and I ate it and didn't even think about it, So, I don't know where I was going with that, other than I don't think that exists in the life between life, so there can be peace and harmony. And everybody, answering your question about age, depends on what you read. Somehow souls recognize each other, whether that's at a vibratory level or a light level, a knowing that we have there that we don't have here. Some manuscripts or books say that there is a visual recognition, and it does seem much like I could touch but there's like nothing there, a holographic image or something. But I don't think people get it. Just is what it is. And I remember there's a book called Heaven is Real that was really popular 4 years ago, and they made a movie of it, and it was supposed to be written by like a 9 or 10-year-old kid who had a near-death experience, made a bunch of money, and then it came out that his dad wrote it, and his dad was a pastor at a church or something like that, and they kind of debunked it, and I can't remember who was talking about it, that the guy, another neurologist that wrote a book called Heaven is Real, or something very similar to that. And some of his work has been discredited recently. But anyway, people are still trying to prove that there's something after all of this.
What do you think our attachment is as a species to not accepting that this could be all there is? What is it the idea that is it just, are we just that terrified of this being the only run? Are we that because I think about that. I don't know why, but I'm okay with the idea of the space between the big nap that I was in before I got here in 1969 and the big nap that will occur hopefully a long ways off. Mark Twain said, and I quoted this before, but he said, I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years and didn't suffer the slightest inconvenience. I'm okay with the idea that there's all this great mystery here of how we got here. Where did all this stuff come from? I think about that every day. It blows my mind. But I've got this quiet peace, just knowing that I get to be here. I get to help some people manage enough of what they've got going on in ways that I've been a Sherpa in my own life, and I can be a Sherpa for them to help carry a few bags, a few loads, to where they get a little bit more out of their opportunities for love and experience, and I get to choose my life the way that I want to do it. And for me, that seems, at this point, it seems to be enough. I don't, if something were to happen, I think, and I was my life would be about to end, I'm sure there'd be a lust for wanting to be here longer, but there would be a radical acceptance that it's just been an amazing ride. And I think the statistical probability of us getting to do this at all is 1 in 400 trillion. 1 in 400 trillion that we get to take a breath on this planet. So I feel that joy every day that I get to be here at all. And, ideas of where this is headed or what's the next step and all that is very interesting to me, and I'm open to that, but I'm not attached to it in a way that I've got to solve it. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a lot of acceptance about this being the only existence that we have significant evidence for, and it brings me a lot of peace, and it brings me into greater responsibility in a moment when I am around people that I love and care about, because I want to dial this in. I don't want to let it be petty, and I want to say I love you and let you know I appreciate this moment and what I learned from it, and just being absolutely present, I think, is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and those that we love. And I think sometimes when we're thinking about what's next, it has a tendency for the human existence to be a little distracted, and to be people that I love very, very much are just thinking this is just a distraction here, but all that matters is what is going to happen next. And I think even slight slivers of that can bring us out of the present moment somewhat on this ride. So yeah. Anyway, I like where you go with it, Jeff. I'm just trying to keep up best I can.
Yeah. One of the things I appreciate about the work I get to do is have conversations like this quite regularly, and trying to be in a place where I like the way you described not being attached. I don't need it to be any certain way, and sometimes you'll see me laugh or giggle at questions you ask, because it's like, who the hell am I to even try to take a stab at answering that question? And trying to answer any of it without being attached to something is really difficult. And so you'll hear me say things like, well, it depends on what books you're reading,
sure,
or what reference you're coming from, or what who you talked to lately, or what did you eat for dinner?
Right.
I can recall a particular conversation I was having in the last month or so. I don't recall the source or the reference that the concept was coming from, but the notion of taking on a physical form, choosing to come to the planet and dealing in the realm of physics, the physical, gives you the ability to have an experience that cannot otherwise be known in the ethereal. And that there
what does the chocolate cake taste like?
Yeah, we've played with that a little bit. It's really fascinating when you get in, when you just consider if that is the main reason that we're here, to have an experience, would explain some of the reasons why we use words like cold when it doesn't exist, or dark when it doesn't exist, or sunrise when that doesn't exist, and all the other references that we make, that they are all experiential forms of what we would call truth that doesn't exist. One of the notions that is gaining popularity is this idea that we come here to actually be bad, to actually steal, to fornicate, to be adulterers, to murder, that we come here to have that experience, to actually know what that's like, to live in that energy, to have that energetic experience.
Like a spiritual Westworld kind of.
Perhaps, yeah. Huh. Yeah. And that's kind of trippy if you think about it. If there's only certain places you can go to really live it and feel it and be it, and then deal with the consequences of all of that, and the whole notion of karma and clearing karma. But that would totally flip the whole thing on its head of, no, we're here to only follow the rules, to only practice love, to only be good, to only love your neighbor, and all that other sort of thing. If that's the only thing that was going on, I don't know how you could learn it. I don't know how you could learn to fly a plane without there being gravity or something that wants to pull it back to the ground. And I don't know how you could run and feel your lungs fill with air if there wasn't some wind that was resisting you and stairs in the way that you had to maneuver around. And it's like there has to be this opposition force, this other energy that makes it difficult to actually have the experience that we would say I learned from that.
So we need the contrast. We need some. Yeah.
It just, that to me seems like a truth. That I cannot love you only ethereally. That's not a word. You know what I was trying to say. In theory. Ethereally. That there has to be an experience to it. And to really love you means that from time to time you got to jack me around.
Right.
Because untested love that just wouldn't be love. It's just convenience or pleasure or fun or something. So apparently it's necessary that we have different levels of consciousness here, and that we don't get along, and we focus on skin color and radical, crazy religious stories to go to war over and kill each other over, and abort babies and take babies away from mothers at the border, and wow. We do all that. So that's been playing games in my head, this idea that could some people... Now, I'm not saying that everybody in every lifetime is coming here to learn to steal or to have the experience of stealing and, these more deadly sins if one ranks higher than another. But it's interesting to just know that maybe there are some of us here for that purpose, that they're literally sitting in the Vista Detention Center right now by design, if you're back to the intelligent design kind of thing, that you're getting that check mark in the box. Yep, you had that experience. I don't know. But somehow it all fits together and it works out. And or you think about the effect that being a sheriff in a facility like that would have.
Oh my gosh.
Of just
I've thought
seeing the dregs of society and just how that would filter your mind of who people are. And you see anybody with dark skin and a spider web on their elbow and you instantly think of unpleasant things. And that, what are they doing here on the planet? They don't even deserve to be here. And yet that guy could be a minister somewhere running some great orphanage because he learned, who knows? But
there was a expose looking at some small town, very white part of the country that was talking about what's happening at the border, and it was in a diner, and they were just, good people. I'm sure that they would be nice to have iced tea with, and they could tell you about their tchotchkes and their doilies, and but they were talking about how they had zero feelings for these children at the border because they were involved with, they were coloring outside the lines. There were rules about our borders, and they weren't concerned at all about if they were escaping some sort of gang violence or retribution or whatever the horrors. They just absolutely don't care. It's an inconvenience. I got mine, and too bad about you. But this grandma was sitting there talking about how she could care less about these children that are in cages being away from their parents because they were involved with a family, a system, an ideology that was coloring outside the lines, and they couldn't care less about these children that were just having their entire worlds turned upside down. And these were good Christian people that were being interviewed. I have a difficult time understanding.
Yeah.
I really have a difficult time understanding.
Let's push on that just a notion.
Yeah.
So let's say that they're 6-year-old kids. And let's say 7 years ago, those kids were in the final stages of planning their journey here at Love You. And one of the experiences they wanted to have was at 6 years old being taken away from their families. The only way to pull that off is there'd have to be people like Granny that doesn't give a rip in order to set the camps up and actually do it, right? Because if they were all people like you,
right.
I ain't setting that camp up. I'm not having anything to do with that, right? And then the kids would be like, I guess we're going to have to come back another time or go some other place. So isn't that fascinating when you're just willing to flip it around and go, well, it has to take both. You've gone to the airport before where you're sitting next to the person and you just can't help ask, where are you going?
Yeah.
Where are you coming from? What you're traveling, right? So imagine like we're getting ready to come here and you're in line. If there's some kind of a Scotty beam me up or beam me down thing or however that happens, that your soul comes down and somehow infuses and all that. And before the button's pushed or however it happens, you're like, where are you going? I'm going to Earth this time. What are you going to do? I'm going to be an abortionist. Oh, really? I'm going to be a clinic that helps moms recover from abortion, and they high five each other because they both know that it takes both. So what if they're excited to come here, even though they're going to possibly be working on both sides of the issue? I don't know. I get excited to kind of just consider and wonder. Because it couldn't just be one side. It wouldn't work. It would tip over.
Yeah.
Or we wouldn't come here at all. If it was heaven here, why leave heaven? So Christians, heaven on earth is never going to happen. Only never. You'd have to stop the magma flow inside the earth from it having flow, because it creates magnetic fields and it makes the earth oscillate and it makes tectonic plates shift, and then boulders fall down on people when you're out there walking your lion that is next to your sheep that somehow now has flat teeth and can eat grass. When you get up in the morning and get ready to go praise Jesus again for the 900th time in the last 24 hours, and somehow you think that's what is going to make you happy today. Okay.
Only an
that would
eternity.
last me for a pretty short period of time. And God made me, so you can't say that's just me. That's just how my mind works, and I just kind of know that wouldn't go down there'd have to be something different about me.
Do you think that there's a God that made you?
Oh, great question. So I think there's a template, and that there's so many different possibilities and choices. I think that there's a lot more of my soul spirit guides that get to decide how I actually show up, personality-wise and interest-wise, and all of that being part of my blueprint. So
that's what
God
resonates.
specifically, no.
Okay.
I'm way, way, way below that pay grade. And I think that energy that we would call God has delegated that so many times, and we're so far down that food chain that, yes, in the big picture, but not in the details.
So I know that in a lot of your work, when you're helping people solve for soul journey and you know, things that need to be shored up and forgiven and, you know, seen and understood and felt and on. I've talked to my own clients that have been through some pretty extraordinary things, and it does seem like there is a recycling of souls here, and that seems to be a very common theme with people who have memory of traumatic events. But I was curious, so I know that you have some experience with that. Have you had experience with a divine creator, you personally? Okay.
Never seen the burning bush.
But you feel like you've been witness to souls that were coming and going, like the accident you saw.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, is it possible that these souls could be coming and going? We could be in that play, because you and I both have met people in our lifetime that we know, like we knew them. It feels like we've known them 1,000 years.
Right.
It's instantaneous. I don't know how else to describe that, and I don't know how there are 3-year-olds that can slam with perfection Beethoven. There are some prodigies here. There are some things that feel like this is just another incantation of something that didn't get finished before. So that to me feels like there's some evidence pushing toward this experience. But what if there's this soul journey and there's not a mothership. there's not a God that necessarily is behind it all. I know it feels good to think that there is a commander that's overseeing it all, but is it possible that there could be this soul journeys and these renderings that don't necessarily have divine intervention or supernatural agency? Does that?
I have to say yes, because all things are possible.
Okay.
With the fun thing about trying to answer these questions is doing it with the limitations of the human mind,
Right?
Of which we have no idea how much bigger or whatever it could be is, that would just laugh at these questions that we're even asking.
Yeah.
So I don't need there to be a single one-person top of the pyramid thing out there. I don't really need to be anything.
Huh.
I do like the idea that I like this notion of a higher self, that there's part of me that's somewhere that's safe and is sending me love and energy to just do this hard thing called life. Because it's hard. There's nothing easy about this.
Nothing?
Not that lasts continually.
Okay.
And if there was, I would wonder.
Because you're a pretty easy guy to be around, Jeff. You've solved for some. You've got some peace in your skin. I'm not saying it's every day's a bucket of rainbows or anything, but for the most part, you're a very pleasant person to be around. You're not dredging up a bunch of. You're not just dragging your crap around with you. You know, you've solved for a lot. You've learned to release, and you've tilled the remainder into the soil, and you've planted some new seeds, and you've got some new insights on things. But I don't know that I agree entirely that this whole thing is hard, because I think sometimes when we get out of the way and just let some things unfurl, that we get to participate in something that can be easy. When we minimize our attachment to how it's supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever our egoic manifestation is. When we can just take a step back and take a breath and just ask ourselves, well, what if it were easy? I can't believe how many times I go into something thinking, because I've been programmed that it's going to be difficult, and I could just take a deep breath and say, well, what if this were easy right now? What would that look like? And if I'm not exploiting myself with some toxic narrative, oftentimes I can create something that's very easy, that wasn't easy the way I was trained for it to be, the way I witnessed it. So, but yeah, I understand now that you're saying that for the sustainable future, it's not easy, because we all go through the process of decay, and, and ultimately, we leave, and that's not often a pretty picture to bear witness to, and it's tough thinking about us going through that kind of scenario. But in this 8 seconds, we're in a place where we're not worrying about bombs going off. At least I'm not. I'm grateful for that. There's no predators that we know of that are lurking, waiting to consume us, and it just feels pretty easy in the comfortable place, and enjoying some conversation and some candlelight and some insights, and this feels easy to me. So, but for the sustainable, yeah, in the blink of the eye, for the next half of our life, there's going to be something nasty that's going to come down the pike for both of us, and one of us is going to get a phone call. That's wild to consider, but anyway, at some point, it doesn't have to be now, but I'd like to know more about your idea of guides, and I think you said angels too, or something, and what gives you a sense that that's the case, and it's not just you being a wise person that's figuring out how to do this thing better because you have a big heart and you care and you want to make it better, because when you're better, you love people more, and you introduce people to new ways of accessing light in that kind of realm. And that's, ultimately what we're doing here, isn't it? If we're not here to learn and love and grow and transcend, we're just kind of spinning our wheels with an accumulation of, these false narratives of success and things that we can't take with us, that we spend our whole lives trying to pocket. But at some point, it'd be cool to hear a little bit more about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sure we will go there.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're doing with the topic of truth. We kind of took a little bit of a turn. But all these things that we're talking about are somebody's truth. And books have been written about it. Religions have been based on it. People have been killed over it and burned at the stake over it. That's kind of cool that we don't live in a time where we have to be worried about people outside the door right now that might get a copy of what we're talking about and take us out and our family members out, and it's
get
nice
us on the
to know
stake.
that.
Yeah.
That notion, you got me to think about the statement I made about this life being hard. And I was thinking big picture or full spectrum, rather than there are beautiful days. I was telling somebody earlier today, they asked me how my day was going, and I said, oh, it's going perfectly. And I said, well, that's a nice answer. I said, well, I see things as some days are difficult and some days are easy. And, today had a little bit of both in it for me. And I call that perfect. if I played the role of the observer and was in flow with everything all the time, I'd be missing out on sadness and the experience of grief and loneliness and all of those, what we would call maybe shadow or other earthly experiences that we did come here to experience. So I'm open to having those also to keep it all in balance. If I was truly the observer and said, "Oh, I don't need my arm. Oh, yeah, it's nice to have you around, Dad, but you're not here anymore. See ya," and just kind of never feel the loss or the despair of I can't get a hug from Dad anymore. I don't think that would be a human experience. It would be some experience, but I don't know that you'd really call that human. So it's okay to cry and feel into all of that stuff, but just don't stay there.
Precisely.
Get out. Okay,
right?
You felt it? Get out.
Did someone teach you that, or did you just kind of figure that out? Like,
no, I don't think I learned it. It just or was taught it. It's like eating food. You eat it and then you poop it out.
Right. Yeah, because I remember thinking as I was doing some big healing work in my life, and someone was asking me about it, and I said, I want to be in it. I want to lean into every bit of that discomfort and that agony and whatever it needs to go on long enough to get the lesson. I just want to be there long enough to get the lesson. I don't want to waller in anything, but I want to feel it all and get the full contrast, the spectrum, long enough to get the lesson, and then move on.
Yeah,
and that just was something that came to me in my heart, in my mind. It just something that made sense, and it's interesting that you found the same without having anybody, without a guru. That'd be another nice thing for the Bible to teach us. And I'll tell you something else about that.
Some actual usable lessons, right?
Well, that's what I was talking to my folks about. They've dedicated their entire lives to their faith, and I noticed that they're largely disquieted in their own skin, and they don't have practices to quiet themselves. And all the time we spent at church and learning, memorizing verses and just the same things over and over and over, and all the parts of the Bible that we avoided because it was, might get us thinking a little bit too much about some of the contrast and controversy and contradictions. But I was trying to get my folks to think about, what if they had spent time, instead of just going to church and having someone telling them X, Y, and Z about life, and what if they were doing something with their breath? What if they were actually doing something with their body, ways of dialing in this energy in this moment to have some peace? Because most of the Christians that I know are the most disquieted people that I ever could imagine being around. And if I pictured 100 Buddhists or 100 Christians, I brought that to my folks' attention, and I just said, well, if you were around those people, who do you think would be more peaceful and more reflective and more enjoyable to be around? And each Christian that besides my folks, they all seem to understand that the Buddhists, they're like, well, yeah, they're just very peaceful people. Well, why is that? They're that way because of what they're thinking. They're that way because of what they're practicing. And I think a lot of the practice, the idea of practice, the idea of quieting is not taught. Breath work and meditation and things like that. It's just this idea of kind of ratcheting up for Sky Daddy to take care of your problems and just let it go. But how do you let it go? It doesn't break things down into bite-sized pieces. And most of the Christians that I know that got sick and realized they were not long for this earth panicked like crazy. and wanted to get rebaptized, and just this negotiation, this fire insurance kind of policy. They wanted to just make sure that they got everything dialed in. And it was hard for me to see the lack of peace that I see a lot of Christians have when they start coming to terms. I mean, why wouldn't they be overjoyed if they really thought they were going where they were going? What is the attachment to this mortal coil that they couldn't just kind of pump the brakes and go, you know what, that's some sad news, but these people are going to be fine, and I'm going to this amazing place. It's ridiculous panic, and I don't find that with people who practice Buddhism, and I've helped some people transition, and it's a marked difference between the two, and I think that's an unfortunate thing, because that's as real as it gets, is that none of us are getting out of this thing alive, and why not develop some tools along the way, share some experience along the way to help ease that idea of transition. And I don't know, that to me would be a very useful thing in that book you were talking about, rewriting in a way that's useful.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I think there's some very practical lessons where the rubber meets the road on some of that.
Along those lines, backing up maybe 10 minutes in our conversation and thinking about useful practices, and also weaving that into being here to feel both the joyful and the sorrowful things that occur, and not just be in that observer role of, I'm cool with everything, man. I'm feeling nothing because I'm not attached to anything.
Right.
Because it's a good thing to be able to do that sometimes, but to live in that place all the time, I don't know. I had two people this past week that one lost their dog, the other one had to put it down, and both tremendously connected to these animals. I'd actually multiple times met these animals because they bring them to the office, and I even felt myself feeling, I'm going to miss Bogart, and I'm going to miss, can't remember the other one's name already, sorry, but it's gone. But both of the people were frustrated with me because I wasn't tearful and I wasn't feeling what they were feeling.
Sure.
And,
Really?
And there were actually almost started attacking of, well, you're just checking out right now and you're not willing to, go through this with me or everything. So I said, okay, I'll go there with you. And so I jumped into a memory I had at age 20 when I had to put my dog down, and it instantly came back. And instantly the tears start welling up in my eyes, and I start telling my story of how hard it was and how, this was my childhood dog and it went everywhere with me. And,
What was it?
His name was Fritz. He was a combo Australian Shepherd and German Shepherd mix. Just an amazing family watchdog companion.
That's quite a combo,
and,
actually.
Had cancer, and we tried to cut it out, and it just wasn't working. So eventually I had to call the vet, and I dug the grave. We put him down and buried him, and we made the cross. Of course, that Jesus would be happy with the dog having a cross, right?
Good Christian dog. Make sure he gets in the...
Yeah. So I was willing to tell the story and feel all that. And it was really interesting because both of them were like, oh, you really do get it. And I said, so now what I did is I had to go back 35 years to grab that. And it wasn't hard to grab. And I'm glad that it's not like, that's not trauma for me. Even though the tears came,
sure.
I just dialed back into the old feeling. And I said, so what I'm able to do for you guys is, you're going to be where I am, where at some point that's there. If you want it, you can always have that.
It's information.
It's always going to be there, but you just don't, it's so close to you right now. There's no time between that and where you are right now.
So what do you think their attachment was to you feeling I mean, is it a misery loves company kind of thing? I mean, what,
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And maybe they wanted to know.
I mean,
just didn't read it in a
is
book
it
somewhere.
but is it a like? Do you think their soul really needed to know that you knew what loss was, or do you think it was just an egoic, or do you think it was just like an egoic thing that, like, if you really care, you're going to get into my current story, and you're gonna I want you to vibrate around the power of my current story. Is that that doesn't feel like soul work? I'm not saying you didn't handle it like a champ the best way that you possibly could, because sometimes we do get in situations where we got to concede a few things, but it doesn't occur to me that you needing to suffer makes their suffering more legit. I'm not talking about your perspective, I'm talking about their perspective. It's an unusual thing to think that they're... What did you make of their need for you to be in suffering with them?
So strategically, it was me joining with them to lead them out of there.
Oh, okay.
And I couldn't do it cognitively. I had to do it in a combination.
Okay. You're not the brass calling orders to the front line. Mm-hmm. You're a seasoned. Mm-hmm. You've got some scars, and I got you. Okay.
But we definitely did not end the session with us both blowing our noses and drying our eyes. It was like, you will get to the point, just like I am, where I can think about my dog intently and go back there. And Fritz he's here all the time with me. It's not, because their fear was gone and forgotten, right? I see. And so being able to show them 35 years ago, it's as real as it was yesterday, but I don't live there. Mm-hmm. And they needed to see that a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, they won't be in that place that they're in. So I don't know. It was fun. It was. You used that word suffering. If Jim were here, he'd be pounding on the table, perhaps. I don't know. It didn't feel like suffering to me to do that. It just felt like the right thing to do.
And I didn't mean to suggest that you were suffering, but something in their story needed to see you in that relatable way. And you just being light and optimistic and compassionate wasn't enough. They needed to know that. I think that's an interesting caveat in our advanced ape lineage. It seems just a little bit odd. I think that we do. I think that we do have a desire for and a comfort in suffering. I think it's a very familiar place, and I think when people can suffer together, I think that it's a great bonding moment. It's a little bit of a strange one, but for you to be okay and having information that was useful, that wasn't enough. They needed to feel you in that resonance, and I wonder what that is about our human nature, that we need to know that about someone to. And I think misery loves company. I think it really does.
It does.
Yeah. Are you thinking we want to get to this tonight? Do you want the quiz? Are we just enjoying the riff?
Yeah, we may as well knock it out.
Yeah.
I think we left off with, I don't remember. Do you? 11?
We
12?
were halfway through on the first round.
All right, let's just call it 12 then.
Okay.
So I can't always get what I want, but I will always get what I need. Good old Rolling Stones.
Oh yeah.
Somebody sang that song.
That's exactly who it is.
There's a phrase in that song that says, "But if I work real hard, I'll get what I need." And I would challenge that our needs are not work related. They just show
But
up.
if we try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need.
Mm-hmm. But you don't really even have to try.
No.
Needs just show up. Wants.
Maybe the try, philosophically, is that you remain open and just allow for that. Because the trying is getting out of the program of it being all this attachment, and then maybe the trying is just that little bit of energy, that little bit of effort of just allowing things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you been playing any more with people really telling you that they haven't gotten what they've needed, and really challenging you on believing that needs don't just show up?
in the recording that wasn't 2 weeks ago, I had spoken a little bit about how I was doing this quiz with some of my clients, and I was astounded by how much pushback I was getting. People were getting pissed off and really triggered, and in ways that I was a little shocked by. Because I think truth is such a personal thing, and I think people get very reticent when someone else, if they think that someone else is trying to provide a universal answer. And I think that's what it was who does this guy think he is, Has he got his own church?
Yep, love you.
Yeah, love you. Yeah. But yeah, I've when I share this with people who, here it is. When people haven't done a lot of their soul work, this is very threatening, because that puts responsibility in their sights. Mm-hmm. People that have lived and learned and transcended and are on a diligent path that they're working and understanding how this whole thing goes, if they're finding flow, people that I know that are finding flow and how their interpersonal journey is going, it's much less so. But those who haven't done certain, and I hope that doesn't sound judgy. It's not at all it's not the spirit in which I'm. But there are people who have, that know how to fly planes, and there's people who don't quite yet know how to fly planes. And sometimes those people try to fly and it doesn't go so well. I think there are people who are trying to really fly, but they don't have the experience, they don't have the training, they don't have the understanding, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the acknowledgement of a particular way that they can be in, a way that they can get out of the way where they can just allow this to be, what's a good way to say that? I hope my intention is to say that we all have work to do, and the better we understand how active our egoic minds are, and wanting to determine that a lot of our happiness, a lot of our peace in this lifetime is, if that's actually within our control, I think that's very threatening to people. Mm-hmm. Is what I'm getting at. And a lot of people are still, might be great people to hang out with, but happiness is out there. It's an external orientation, and that breed, that ilk, this is very threatening to people that are a little further along, that have been through some stuff, and who are capable of greater forms of unconditional love, agape love, as the Bible refers to it. People who understand that and who have applied that tend to do a lot better on this test, has been my idea.
Yeah. For the sake of our podcast, I think we've all agreed that love is the truth of the question is that our needs are always met. And that the proof is that we're here.
And that would be a beautiful, beautiful book in that, the new Bible you're talking about.
Published by Loveview and all the professors that
Why not?
Work there. Yeah. All right, I will get what I need, regardless of how hard I really try. Yeah, I've kind of already played with that a little bit. You want to expound on that anymore?
Not for me personally, but I can understand how that could be difficult because people are taught that they need to stay in school. They need to just, stick out this relationship, and that that effort by the sweat of your brow will come your happiness and your and it's a tough imprint to get away from. But yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, the add-on that I'd put in there would be this idea that content versus discontent has to do with getting wants and needs confused. If you know that you're always going to get what you need, you will be content. Bottom line. You can work up from there. Joy, euphoria. And if there's something that you're discontent about, it's because it's a want that you think is a need. Now that would be another one of those really basic, hey, here's how you get yourself out of this place. You were talking about the Bible not necessarily being very helpful in helping people get out of the place that they're in. Well, this is a really simple one.
Yeah.
If I'm discontent, I'm focused on a want, not a need. Not that that's a bad thing.
Right.
But just to go, okay, well, because there is effort for wants. Because even if you reference the Bible doesn't say I'm faithful to give you everything you want. It does say I'm faithful to give you what you need. Your needs will be met. The same way that the sparrow eats and all that other sort of thing. I know I really messed that up. But I got the concept down. The more I try to get what I believe I need right now, the harder it seems to get it. And that's back to the same idea that if you need something, it will come to you exactly when you need it. Only exactly. Maybe sometimes a little bit in advance. But if you really need it and it's not here, you don't really need it.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? And when we really say, I really got to have this, I'm trying so hard, and it's not showing up.
And so another way to frame trying really hard, to me, is forcing something.
Yeah.
And if you ever spend any time, and I know you have, on bodies of water and tides and how rivers flow and everything, you don't do well when you're resisting flow. And if we're looking at reality and we're imposing another reality, back to Byron Katie's work, Loving What Is, great book for those listening at home. But this idea of suffering being optional is because we create these parallel realities of how we think it's supposed to be, rather than just going, okay, well, this is... And that's another University of Life chapter in that book is helping people understand what over-efforting looks like, and when to just take pause and realize, like, you're swimming against the current,
right?
And you're depleting all of your resources in doing so, and you're going to be... I watched this happen in Miami. I watched a college athlete who was excited to be out in some big waves. A storm was coming, not quite a hurricane, but a tropical storm. And I watched this guy, and people were screaming at him to not try to swim in. He was swimming against the tide, and I watched this guy, this college athlete, just go under. Depleting all, instead of just, he could have just dog paddled. If he was in a pool, we could have been there all day. but because his mind was all caught up with everything, and
Right.
God bless his heart. But if we're over-efforting, if we're trying to restrict something or force something, it's a good indication that we're not quite in accordance with flow.
Mm-hmm.
And need, I guess, would be a good way to put that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if I stop trying to get what I believe I need right now, I would be content right now.
Let's do that one again.
Okay? If I stopped trying to get what I believe I need right now, I would be content right now.
Yeah.
So just another way of wording that wants
Yeah.
and needs thing.
Yeah. And I just see this river, and if I quit trying to swim against the current, I would be okay. Because you're really not going to do well if you're fighting against it. Does that make sense? Is that a decent corollary for you?
Let's put another example out there. So what's something that people think they need right now and that they're really trying hard to get it? You know, the right job, the new house, the perfect spouse, the 2.4 kids or whatever.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it isn't happening. Okay, well, stop trying.
Yeah.
What do you have? What do you have that you can be content with? I have my health. I got some great books to read. Apparently I'm not supposed to work today.
Yeah.
Or the kind of work I want to do, maybe that's not where I'm not there yet. I can go mow the lawn. I can do something. Be productive if I'm feeling the need to do that.
And if you want to up-level the whole thing, do it for somebody else.
Right? I do not have to try to get my needs met. They simply come to me when I need them.
And by the way, this is a true or false quiz if you're hearing this for the first time.
I think we've already worked that one through. Just another way of saying the same thing. Sometimes it's interesting when you do say it a different
Just
way.
a little,
It clicks a little
Do
bit
that one
for
more time,
people.
please.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I do not have to try to get my needs met. They simply come to me when I need them. I stole that one straight from Byron Katie's book.
Huh. Loving What Is?
Loving What Is. She was referencing needing a hug from her daughter.
That's right.
And it wasn't happening. And then it did. And so she had to deal with what was going on with me when I felt I needed it so much and it wasn't happening. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't need a hug from my daughter, is what the universe was telling her. You can be content without a hug from your daughter right now. And the issue was her daughter was on the streets and she was concerned about her. And don't even need a daughter, really.
Right.
We laugh, but that's true.
Yeah, that's true. And I like what Byron Katie in that exact scenario said, that she noticed her daughter was using drugs to make herself sick. And then when she recognized that she was using her daughter using drugs to make herself sick, that she was involved with the same disparaging and spiraling negative spiral. So I think that's really powerful. I think it's really beautiful that she had all that clarity around that, because I helped my mom understand that, because I have a brother who's kind of off the deep end with some of that. And I said, my brother using drugs, meth, for as long as he has is, it's sad. It's awful. But you literally making yourself ill over him doing that is keeping you from your grandkids, and it's keeping you from being the best that you can be in this 1 in 400 trillion shot. And how is that love? How is that, oh, you don't understand, you're not a mom. I'm like, yeah, you're right, I don't understand that. But how is that effective? How is that moving any needle forward? how is that brightening your light to call him into a better way of being eventually? If you're down and out, you don't have that oxygen mask on yourself, and you're just passed out, suffering from the suffering. It's a funny thing, but I get where you're going.
Yeah. We're taking a little bit of a deviation here. As time moves in waves of 8-second intervals, I can manage things for 8 seconds at a time. So there's some background to the question, and it comes from some of Einstein's work on his theory of relativity and then string theory and T-theory. But it's been shown that our human brain perceives time 8 seconds at a time, and that there are a lot of things like waves crashing at the seashore, classical music, speech patterns, and even professional rodeo getting credit for a full ride happens to be 8 seconds. And it's interesting how, if you studied why not 7 seconds, why not 9 seconds? Well, it was like that's long enough. Well, how long is long enough? And somebody put a stopwatch to it, and it came out to 8 seconds. So that also comes from Byron Katie's work. She talked about it anyway. Didn't do the math behind it and all that sort of thing, but she mentions that. And just this idea that you don't have to do what 12 Steps says is just one day at a time. Well, that's a whole bunch of 8-second intervals, right? Just 8 seconds at a time. And you can do anything for 8 seconds at a time, even if you're laying in the desert and you got 2 broken arms and one arm is off to the side and you're bleeding a lot.
And you can get your helmet off.
I can do this 8 seconds. And now that I've got those 8 seconds of experience, I can do 8 more seconds of experience.
Just about anything else.
Because I just survived that 8 seconds, and I can do another one, and I can do another one. And before you know it, the next 6 were easier than the first 3, generally. Sometimes pain ebbs and flows and comes and goes, but we have all dealt with all of our pain our whole life. We've dealt with all these 8-second intervals of the really hard days and the really easy days. We've done it. We're actually masters at dealing with all of that stuff. I love when people tell me, I could never do that again. I'm like, wait a minute, you did it for 10 years. You're a freaking master. What do you mean you couldn't do it again? And as long as you tell yourself that story, you're setting yourself up to have to do it again. You can say, I look so forward to doing that again because I would just kick its ass.
Yeah. I'd be in and out.
Then the universe would go, we don't need to do that.
Check.
All right, so 8 seconds at a time. When people challenge this question, it's kind of fun. I ask them, is there anything you don't have right now that you need in this 8 seconds? People say, a glass of water, a cup of coffee, I need my rent paid. And I'm like, okay, well, let's time it. 8 seconds goes by.
You're still here. You're still breathing.
So, yeah,
your heart's beating.
Okay, the next question. All I have to do is get from these 8 seconds to the next 8 seconds. So from this moment to the next moment. And that's what the math was saying, is that what we call being present, living in the moment, or the now, is 8 seconds. So I'm using those terms interchangeably. So getting from this moment to the next is just 8 seconds. I can do that moment by moment.
And it's kind of along the, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
One bite at a time. So our minds do well breaking it down and something that we can digest, and people know what 8 seconds look like. And that's I think that can be a source of comfort for a lot of people. Yeah.
I recently found a web page that I look at from time to time when I plan a fishing trip or I'm going to go out to Catalina, that there are buoys up and down the Pacific coast that measure wave height and wave frequency. And it's almost always 7, 8, or 9 seconds. And so it's that average that's right there. And that was kind of cool to recently discover that, because it's like, if you go to I've tried it, go to the seashore and measure it, and it's hard to know which break. And but anyway, just to know that beyond the breakers, they're out there doing that constantly. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
Some people have said they think that's why we like going to the seashore. It's like a natural metronome that just kind of sets us in sync with the natural rhythm.
That and the negative ions.
Yeah.
What a lovely combo.
All right. When I live in the moment and am present, I will be content. So in parentheses was, when I live in the moment, 8 seconds of now, I am present, and I will be content. And hardly anybody lives there. Most people are living in the last 8 seconds or the next 8 seconds, but not this 8 seconds. And when we are living in the 8 seconds, the thought thread is, I have what I need now in this 8 seconds. And when I think the thought, I have what I need now in this 8 seconds, the feeling is content. And that's the worst it will ever be. There's nothing worse with the thought, I have what I need now, than content. There's nothing lower than that. You can build up on it, again, going from joy, content, peace, joy, euphoria, ecstasy. But I like that. That's, for me, a very powerful truth, that if I'm in this moment, I have what I need. Proof. Here I am.
Yeah.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
And...
But it hurts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's pain in life.
Yeah,
You're right.
yeah.
There is pain. Sometimes, right? And even people in chronic pain have their easier days and their harder days. And learn from it. It's here for a reason. Figure it out. Sooner the better.
Please.
If I am anything but content, my mind is not present. It is in the past or the future. And I kind of already let the cat out of the bag on that one.
That's a big trigger for people who are externally oriented in their happiness. That's a tough one for people that I've dealt with. Yeah. That's beautiful.
All right, we are ripping through these. We're on number 21. My body is always in the present and experiences stress when my mind is elsewhere in thought. I love that one.
Me too.
So that's why breath is so important, right? And how it pulls us right back to being present.
I've dealt with people that are having massive anxiety attacks, and I'll say, look at me. I want you to take a nice deep breath right now with me right now. I'll breathe with you. And they'll refuse. They're breathing, but there's some part of their psyche that's so wanting this manifestation of this huge uproar, this big ripping of like of their consciousness, just like it's this defiant moment where they are afraid to get on board with having it alleviated, or like they really want. I guess what I'm saying is, I dated a lady who had really, really bad anxiety, and I learned some skill sets to help her when she was in that state, and I was often mystified by how much pain she was in, but how little she was willing to do to get out of it. Like she was just surrendering to this downward spiral that she was in. And I started noticing that when people, oftentimes when they're, and maybe you could speak to this, but when people are willing to do something about it, really take a stand and fight those dragons, wonderful results happen. It's really a lot about breath. And when people refuse to breathe, with your background, what is that? What is the need for people to be in that? Is it because it's predictable? Because it's a certain kind of pattern? Or what keeps people from wanting to feel better in those moments?
they're playing the role of the poor me or the victim.
Mm-hmm.
It is fascinating when you offer assistance to somebody in that place and they'll say no. Whether
You don't
they use that
understand.
word
Yeah.
or the response is a no, they got to hang on to it for some reason. Like, why?
Yeah.
Let them figure it out.
Huh.
Why? You like this? You want this?
Huh.
You can get out of it that fast.
Yeah.
You want me to join you, don't you? You really want me to get in there with you, huh? Then I can really understand it, right? Like I need to do that,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I think I'll stay on the sidelines on
So you
this
just
one.
hold the line and just ask them, just kind of check in and say kind of the how's this working for you kind of deal? I mean, how do you...
Some people aren't going to get it for like a decade.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, just keep loving them.
Yeah.
Let them do the poor me thing for a while longer. It'll happen.
And at what point do you introduce the idea that they are caught up in a victim deal?
Oh, there's a moment when they're asking.
Okay.
You know,
When they're asking.
Yeah, when
Okay.
they're asking. In whatever way they're asking. Or there's the moment of just, I don't want to do this with you anymore. That's why I haven't answered your phone call in a while. I'm sure there are some that are lifelong poor meers and victims. That's just where they're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's all right.
Yeah.
And then there's those that aren't, and they're ready now, and we bump into them and get to watch them grow and change. That's pretty exciting.
Isn't it?
All right, knowing that I always get my needs met in every 8 seconds makes me content. I don't have anything to add to that.
No, not anything.
Struggling from the cocoon is vital to a butterfly's development in order to fly and thrive.
Sorry, I'm laughing. In the podcast that didn't get recorded, there was a lot of pushback by Jim about the way this was worded, but that's why I'm giggling. Would you please, I distracted my own self, would you please repeat that one?
Right, and also the background is that word struggling has shown up many times in our discussions as well, right?
Uh-huh.
So number 23, struggling from the cocoon is vital to a butterfly's development in order to fly and thrive.
And paraphrasing what Jim's approach was that, is it really a struggle? Is it not just some sort of natural tendency that this creature has? And but from our vantage point, it's certainly, if we were in a similar situation, it would suck. It would be claustrophobic. It would be horrendous. It'd be a lot of work. The butterfly is clearly exhausted after, well, the larva is clearly exhausted as it starts to break through the chrysalis. And I thought it was interesting what you were saying is that if people come along thinking, oh, poor little guy, let me see what I could do for him here, and they bust open the chrysalis for him, because they didn't get that opportunity to develop their strength and push against that and get the blood flow to the outer parts of the wing, they're missing out on that whole future opportunity to be as a robust a version of themselves as they possibly can be. And in fact, they won't be able to fly, a lot of them, when they've been helped in that way. And what a gorgeous, how analogous to the human plight and the human suffering. And when someone's going through something, let them go through it. Don't go save them. Let them have their tears. Mm-hmm. It's an important process that. But yeah, I absolutely love that one. I love that one.
I can't help but want to talk a little bit more about, every time butterflies comes up, it takes me back to, since we're still talking about truth, science has to admit it does not understand the metamorphic process of going from a caterpillar to a butterfly. That there's actually...
What's it called?
The metamorphosis? Or
No.
The magic ooze?
The magic ooze.
Yeah, that's... The caterpillar liquefies, and it rearranges its molecules into the form of a butterfly. And no other organism does it. It's unique, to the butterfly, and we don't understand how that happens. And I just love that. I love that we have to look at something so simple and go, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. I was out walking up a flight of stairs today, thinking if anybody else was around me, and I said, hey, do you know how we actually walk up these stairs? That nobody would be able to tell me how we actually are able to do that.
Right.
Well, yeah, you put one foot in front of the other. Well, how do you do that?
Yeah.
How does that actually happen? Isn't that funny? To something so simple that.
So
and
common.
we have to walk around as these dumbasses that don't even know how we get around or how butterflies. It's all so funny to me. We come here so incomplete in knowing this stuff, but yet we think we know it all. And I don't know. Some people think they do. I'm definitely not one of them. I don't know anything. I'm going to stick to that. All right. Challenges and struggles to emerge into a new phase of life is vital to my ability to thrive.
Back to the butterfly.
Yeah. I would love to know if somebody's done any longitudinal studies on natural birth versus a C-section. Wouldn't that be interesting? Based on this same notion? What the difference is. There's got to be. There just seems like there would have to be. Because you're missing out on that.
A loosely related offshoot. I was talking to a pretty fascinating gentleman who does some healing work up in the Bay Area, and he and I were having a conversation about women who've had plastic surgery and how he's seen studies that show that children who grow up around adults who can't express with their facial features, that it stymies a portion of their developmental what is it? I can't remember which part of the brain it is, but because they're not having the mirroring and the expression and like that, just that little crinkle and the little that it stymies and stunts, and the children's faces don't develop as a result of that. So back to it seems somewhat
okay. I want to understand what you just said. Somewhere along the way I picked up the idea that we can have 1,500 different facial expressions.
Ooh.
So
wow.
If someone's had plastic surgery, what you're saying is maybe it's only 1,300 now, because that was pulled a little tighter, and that fourth wrinkle that used to be in the forehead isn't quite doing that anymore. Something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it would even be a much smaller number. It's a very strange thing. I don't know how much you're around it, but it's and it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. If we are so, what are babies looking at? They're not looking at our elbows. They might look at our hands for a second, but it's all in the face. Even lizards, when lizards are checking you out, they're doing their little push-ups and stuff, they're not looking at your knees, they're looking at your eyes, they're looking at your face, seeing what's going on. 1,500, wow.
And there's even subtle changes that are happening here.
In the ears.
Yeah, just things we wouldn't even
Can you wiggle
imagine.
your ears? A little? A little?
I don't know.
That was on the 23andMe.
I don't know.
They wanted to know that in my 23andMe. One of the questions.
I've never looked in the mirror to see if I could do that.
Yeah. And that's all leftover stuff anyway from other incantations. Yeah, exactly.
Like horses,
Uh-huh.
right? Or something like that. Number 25. I welcome new challenges and struggles as they are essential to my life and those around me. So that was my life view kind of thought process. Is anytime a new struggle or challenge comes to me, I know that I'm right where I need to be for whatever lesson is coming down. Because I generally don't just wake up one day and go, I got it! I've figured out how to do this! Mm-hmm. And then I can do it without practicing. So maybe there's a new thought process that will come, but it's going to take some practice to actually get good at it. And that's, to me, where the struggles or the challenges come, to really put it in practice.
And for the sake of Jim, who can't contest the word, what's another word for struggle?
Well, I put "and challenges."
Okay.
To me, it's just a challenge. Yeah, that's... I don't know.
There's stuff that's easy and there's stuff that's not.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about the stuff that's not a breeze, the stuff that we have to kind of really talk ourselves into the one foot in front of the other kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so those a lot of people as they get older, they just like, I don't want any more new challenges. I just want to cruise. I just want to chill.
Right.
So I'm not sure that's the right course to take.
Yeah.
Like a great way to stop growing. Getting out of the game.
Mm-hmm. And a way to kind of create a rut. And the difference between a rut and the grave is just measured by depth, right?
Interesting. Well, we could call this one completed, the intermediate quiz. That was fun.
Yeah.
Enjoyed that.
Absolutely.
Do you have any final thoughts for our time tonight on the mic?
No, I think we covered it. I like the way it went down. So
yeah. I liked your wrap into the maybe these would be more tangible, useful truths of how to.
The guidebook.
I think you said the dots were closer together, or you did something like was more applicable. Something that was my word, but
yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, me too. And maybe there is something here maybe there is a guidebook waiting in all of this. There's some really basic stuff that most people don't know.
Yeah.
Stuff that you and I had to kind of beat our heads against the wall for a while and take the long, hard road through the broken glass to get to some universal understandings of some of this stuff. And
yeah. Well, I know I've worked with a lot of what I would call broken men over the years in different men's groups that I led when I was part of a church program that, they were struggling with pornography or addiction or infidelity or whatever. And the church does a great job of beating people up over those kinds of things. And what they were coming to me with is, I've prayed more. I've gotten on my knees and prayed more. I read every morning. I do this book and that book, and I've joined this group, and I have all the faith that I can know how to muster, and I still do this. Whatever this is. Or people that come from the Catholic, bent on this would be like, I've done all my Hail Marys. I have my rosary beads, and the Father telling me, and go your way and sin no more. I don't know how to do that. It doesn't work. I don't know, maybe for some it does, but I never met those some. So I do think that being content is a key, knowing we have what we need. Pretty cool. We'll keep getting what we need. The universe isn't going to change the rules tomorrow.
No.
And whether we get another shot at this or not, I don't know how much that changes anything. You're still either going to be content or not. That's really content or discontent. How do you want to do it?
Yeah.
Whether there's 20 rides or one ride, you want to do it content or not.
Well
right?
said. Yeah.
All right, man. Had fun with you tonight, Timothy.
Yeah, likewise, Jeff.
Plug in again.
All right. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.